Welcome back to We Are Washington. We're outside of the National Zoo today talking to author Kara Arundel about her book, Raising America's Zoo. Kara, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're talking about the story of this book, which is the first generation of zoo gorillas came here to the National Zoo in D.C., and their caregivers, and the stories of triumph and heartbreak and everything that happened in between. It's a really, really interesting read. Tell me a little bit about the story behind the first generation of zoo gorillas here.
Yes, this is the true story of a family of gorillas at the National Zoo and the zoo's evolution from an antiquated animal park to an internationally renowned and respected conservation center.
Well, why was it important to bring gorillas here to the National Zoo in D.C.?
Well, when they came, it was very competitive among zoos. In fact, in the 50s, there were a lot of zoos that had gorillas, but the National Zoo didn't. And it was even after decades of trying to contact their sources in Africa and contract with hunters still. So when Nick Arundel brought these baby gorillas over, there was real big effort to make sure those gorillas were healthy and carried on the population.
How this impacted the zoo, how this sort of, I guess, changed the path of evolution for the National Zoo in your story. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. It's not just the gorillas, but all of the animals. But my book is focused on the gorillas. And you see through those times, through the 1950s and 60s, the medications were getting better. Better animal management practices. Instead of being caged alone in one barred cage, now they put families of gorillas together.
Tell me a little bit about why it was important to you to write the book and tell the story and to have that out there. Obviously, it's a big time investment to write a book, and a lot of research went into it. So why was that important to you?
Right. I started really becoming interested in the story of these gorillas because my father-in-law brought these two baby gorillas, a boy and a girl, over from Africa in 1955 and donated them to the National Zoo. And through the years, the story was that he had captured these gorillas, but he didn't want to talk about it. And he passed away in 2011, and he had saved boxes of journals and photos and news clippings. And the story of the capture wasn't necessarily all included in those boxes, but it really led me to research more about these gorillas and their keepers. I went to the Smithsonian Archives right here in Washington, D.C. Because the zoo is part of the Smithsonian institution. They preserve all those records. And what I came out with was an amazing story of the zoo's history and the contributions of these gorillas, their offspring, and the people who cared for them in the essential time during the 60s, 70s, and 80s when zoos really transformed to become more conservation focused.
In general, of course, reading the book, there's a lot here, but the pictures are great too. And I think that it really helps in telling the story, and it really helps in sort of painting that picture.
Right. Some of the first few pictures are of Nick meeting the gorillas in Africa when they were about 16 and 20 months old, boy and a girl. And then their first few weeks here at the zoo, they were always put together because they were babies and they grew up together, or they were captured at different times. They weren't brother and sister, but they were always together. So at the National Zoo, they put them together.
I want to know, if I was to go and pick this book up off the shelves, what would be the biggest surprise that I would get out of it in terms of what would be something I didn't expect to hear about or read about DC or the zoo or these gorillas that is, just really impressive that you've kind of told the story about?
Great. I think really two things would be very surprising. One, in the early history of the zoo, when the city and federal government worked together in a partnership 50-50 to support the zoo. During that time, to get more animals, a lot of DC area residents would donate animals from their backyard, snakes and turtles and bunnies. But then some other residents who went on more extended adventures would come back with more unusual animals to donate to the zoo. So the first population of the zoo animals were really donated from area residents.
Where can we find it? Where are you selling the book? Where could people go if they wanted to pick it up?
Yes, definitely on our website, raisingamericaszoo.com, and Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and also Politics and Prose.
Kara, thank you so much again for joining us. It's all the time that we have, but there's a lot to unpack here, a lot to this story, and I think that you should definitely give it a read if you're interested in the zoo gorillas or just the National Zoo here in DC itself, right? So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.